Roger is a well-known entity to us, but his history and work are worth reviewing. Roger Moore's voice and words are a familiar song to anyone who pays attention to poetry and to words. His musical timbre is a clue to his Welsh stock, and a lifetime spent reading, teaching, and knowing some of the great writers and poets of the past centuries. But it is his deep understanding of 17th century Spanish literature that set him apart early on. His groundbreaking academic exploration and teaching of Cervantes, Quevedo, among others, in both English and Spanish, no less, brought his work to the international stage. He has been the recipient of numerous teaching and academic awards, such as the AAU Distinguished Teacher of the Year in 1997, which is the award from the Atlantic Association of Universities, and includes the 3M National Teaching Fellowship 2000 award. Roger's writing has won and been listed in dozens of literary journals, contests, and imprints. Roger's acted as an editor in at least 13 publications. I think that's amazing. And offered guidance and support to hundreds of students, fellow writers, and even complete strangers. He's published numerous papers, poems, and short stories, somewhere around 40, enough to fill his own bookstore, really. In fact, just in 2019, Rogers released 4 books: Time Spirits, Academy Railway Station, Tales from Tara, and Scarecrow. Scarecrow is a timeless work of definitive beauty, and the work is brought alive by the gorgeous illustrations of Mr. Jeff Slater, who we hope will be with us shortly. I'd like to talk about Jeff for just a second before giving the floor over to you. Jeff Slater is an interesting fellow. That's my understatement for the evening. I once heard a colleague of his describe him as an inventor, a gifted painter, an environmental artist, an art director, a teacher, a former professional hockey player, someone who bicycles miles every day of the year, and then has the nerve to be witty and good looking on top of it. He's the guy you want across the table from you at any bar in the world. From the gouache approach he learned in art school to his more recent efforts in line painting, Jeff is a bit like the sharks off the St. Andrews coast. He keeps moving, devouring every artistic project he tackles. And to quote him, "I never met an art medium I didn't like." So, bonus points to the two of them because both have chosen to live in New Brunswick and thereby enriching my life. And of course, this is all about me, right? So, shall we begin? Yes. Thank you for your time.
Well, so I want to thank Michael Bobby and Nadia for inviting me here and Chuck for introducing me so nicely. I'll introduce Jeff when he gets here, but for Mike and Nadia, I have a small token of my appreciation, and I'm dedicating this to you tonight. It's called One Small Corner. And this is the good thing, to find your one small corner and to have your one small candle, then to light it and to leave it burning its sharp, bright hole in the night. Around you, the walls you constructed. Inside, the reduced space, the secret garden, the holy of holies where roses grow and no cold wind disturbs you. Is it here, you ask? Or over here? If you do not know, I cannot tell you. But I will say this, turning a corner one day, you will suddenly know that you have found a perfection that you will seek again in vain for the rest of your life. Yeah, one small corner. That's for you, Mike, and for you, Mike. Thank you. The tradition, transition, I got transitions. The transition is survival and Christmas and homelessness and people on the street. And I have a little story called On the Outside Looking In, and it would suit that little picture up there very nicely, but it goes like this. As I walked home from school, it started to snow. Not the pure white fluffy snow of a pretty Merry Christmas card, but the dodgy, slippery mixture of rain, snow and ice pellets that turned the steep streets of my little seaside town into an ice rink. I turned up the collar of my coat, bowed my head, and stuffed my hands into my pockets. 2 houses before my own, I stopped in front of our neighbour's house. The window shone like a beacon in the gathering dark. I drew closer, pressed my nose against the window and looked in. A Christmas tree, decorated with lights, candles, more decorations, a fire on the hearth, 2 cats curled up warm before that fire, presents beneath the tree, stockings hanging from the mantelpiece. For a moment, my heart unfroze, and I felt the spirit of Christmas. Then I thought of my own house, cold and drafty, no lights, no decorations, no fire, snowballs and icicles snuggled back into my chest and refused to melt. When I got home, our house stood chilled and empty. My parents were out at work and the fire had died. Nothing was ready for Christmas. I sat at the kitchen table, took out my sketchbook and began to draw and colour. When my mother came home, I showed her my picture. Very nice, she said, without looking up. But Mum, you haven't really seen it. She blinked and stared at the picture. This time she saw the Christmas tree and the lights, the cats and the candles, the decorations and the presents. But she never noticed the little boy standing outside the house in the icy sleet and falling snow, peering in through the window. Ooh, we got visitors. Jeff Slater and Jessie Green. Come in, come in, come in, come in. Now we change pace because what I have got is something different. No, something different. No. What have I got that's different? Ooh, that's what I got to do. This is Scarecrow. And Scarecrow, come up here, Jeff. Don't you go running down there. He's gone running down there. This way, Jeff. Sure, yes, sir. You have to do 2 things. You give that to Jessie, and you come up beside me for 2 minutes. Okay. And, since you're younger than me, you can stand. Now, Scarecrow, as you can see from the front cover, is an artistic collaboration. And it's a collaboration between Geoffrey Slater and myself. Jeff heard the story and illustrated it, and this is the result, Scarecrow. Jeff sent me a set of cat pictures and said, could I do anything with them? And I have now written a book called 12 Days of Cat, and they are the words that illustrate Jeff's drawings. So between us, we are collaborating in a written world and a visual world, a verbal and a visual world. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to read the introduction to Scarecrow. And then I'm going to get Jeff to read his introduction to Scarecrow. So, my introduction to Scarecrow. In the beginning, must there always be a beginning? No, not when things begin in medias res, in the middle. 6 writers attended that first Kira Creative Boutique in October 2018. One evening, as we gathered to share our day's creative work in the middle of the matter, as one might say, someone asked me to read one of my stories. I opened my computer, checked my files, and chose Scarecrow. The response to my reading astonished me. Question followed question, An open discussion centered initially on the creation myth with which the story starts, and the naming myth when the protagonist gives names to the creatures in the garden. Attention then turned to the twin ideas of garden as sacred place and sanctuary. Planting and harvest are obviously key, as are the themes of decline and fall and the movement of the planets in the Platonic universe. The question of the relationship between the creator and the created is also deeply rooted in religion, literature, and philosophy. The tradition of the bonfire at the end is well entrenched in human history, recalling as it does man's inhumanity to man, as seen in the Spanish Inquisition, the Catholic-Protestant wars and divisions in Europe and Britain, and of course Guy Fawkes' Night in England and Wales, with its bonfires, fireworks and traditional guise, those straw, leaf and rag-stuffed effigies that crown the bonfires each year after being dragged through the streets, sitting or lying in wheelbarrows, as part of your autumnal garden clearance on November the 5th, bonfire night. As I was reading, Jeff opened his sketchbook and started sketching. Before the story was even finished, the first preliminary sketches of Scarecrow had already appeared, and Jeff continued drawing throughout the evening. I want to illustrate this story, Jeff said, and he did, and the rest, as they say, is history. I love cliches. Above all, this book is a collaboration between a writer verbal and a line painter and muralist who is also an excellent draftsman, visual. In places, I changed the original text of Scarecrow slightly to accommodate the drawings, and the drawings themselves are based on the text, but not only on the written text, because they take in a new set of circumstances. Those reenacted and visualized by Jeff and his family, all creative and visual artists, in the privacy of their own house and garden, where they staged the scenes from Scarecrow that Jeff then transferred with graphite pencil from the stage to the printed page. But that, as I have said elsewhere, is someone else's story to tell, and only Jeff can tell it, as I hope he will do in his own introduction, the visual side of it.
Well, so as you can see, I've said this to you before, and I think I might have said it to Chuck, the reading voice that I had in my head used to be Lauren Green. I'd read everything, and that's the kind of the voice I hear. You're like, this slow, it took me forever to read books. And now knowing Roger, it's changed to Roger's voice. He's just such a soothing voice. That's the voice I hear in my head when I read anything. So it will pain you to hear me read anything after his silky tongue. Anyway, did you make it longer? Yours just
No.
it seemed like you had a short thing. And
Very slowly, very slowly.
Word. I haven't even seen this yet. It's fantastic.
I know.
Right, here we go. So Roger asked me to write a little introduction. I brought a chicken feather. St. Andrews. We live very rurally, so things will come out of our pockets and stuff like that. Anyway, in the fall of 2018, I had the pleasure of helping facilitate a creative retreat, writing and painting at Kingsbury International Residence for the Arts, along with Roger and Jeremy Gilmer. This workshop was set up to help writers expand their creative horizons. As a visual artist, I was there along with giving painting workshops to share storytelling cues from a visual artist's point of view. Every evening, each participant shared their day's work with the group, and this is how I came to hear the story Scarecrow from the poetic voice of Roger himself. As the words came out, I immediately began sketching, and by the time I was finished, I knew what Scarecrow would look like, and more than that, wanted to illustrate the story. I keep a garden, and every year I'm looking to ward off pests with my own scarecrows. Some years are more successful than others. But in this character, Scarecrow, I also saw many things that I associate with myself as a visual artist. So often, I struggle with story, with concept, with new ideas. These elements are my garden. And so often, I'm fighting off pests, protecting the garden, warding off loneliness, and a seemingly unappreciative world Many artists have similar feelings, and I felt I kind of shared them with Scarecrow. With Roger's encouragement, I set aside some time every month to come up with a new illustration plate, using myself and my family members as models, and my garden as the backdrop. I began staging each scene, taking working photographs for use in my studio. When drawing, I was looking for kind of a subtle melancholy with a hint of darkness, and chose to do the illustrations with graphite. I focused on principal features and added very little background detail. I was intrigued by the movement that surrounded the Scarecrow and sought for that in my drawing. In this way, I went beyond the creation of a third dimension into the instigation of movement and emotion. At times, I felt the Scarecrow was a dance, almost a ritual ballet, and I tried to recreate the dance movements in a couple of drawings. As the seasons rolled by, the crows, the deer, the robins all made an appearance in my yard and all became part of the illustrations. For the final staging, when Scarecrow is sacrificed to the flames, even Jeremy Gilmer made an appearance, helping me set the bonfire and place the Scarecrow on top of it. It's possible he even struck the match because when the time came, I didn't really want to do it. I have found this creative collaboration with Roger unsurpassed in my experience as an artist, and our conversations on the process of creativity, verbal and visual, have enriched my life, and I hope we can do more of it together. That's my little bit.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to read Scarecrow now. Okay?
Thanks, Marlo.
We'll have a little look at Scarecrow. You've all got it, so you can follow the text. Yes, I didn't put it up. Okay. It takes about 10 minutes.
Roger, excuse me, I didn't get it.
You didn't get them?
No.
Grab it off there.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, dear.
All right, in the second roll.
Okay. So Scarecrow. In the beginning was the thought. The thought became words, 3 words. Let's do it. The words became deeds, and they created me. In the first act, they planted a long dry stick for my body. In the second, they tied another stick crosswise for my arms. In the third, they gave me an old LL Bean shirt for my torso. It was an ancient, bedraggled Portuguese flannel, and they plumped it out with rags. In Act 4, they assembled my lower body and gave me for legs an old pair of Levi jeans stuffed with straw. In the 5th, they placed a blank canvas hood over the top of the stick and presented me to the world. They stuffed my head with lovable odds and ends, but like my legendary ancestor, I yearned for a handful of safety pins to sharpen my brains. In the 6th, they taped my neck to the top of the stick. Gloves they gave me, threadbare, with holes at the end of the fingers where the straw broke through. That same day, they stuck an old battered trilby on top of my head, and I was a scarecrow, man-made and in his image. In the 7th act, they rested. Beautiful, they said with pride, but they could not disguise my lack of beauty, nor could they breathe life into their creation. A scarecrow I was, stuck in the earth and tied to a pair of sticks. They danced around me, clapping their hands and singing songs of self-praise as I became a barber's maypole. The children laughed to see such fun, but when their fun was done, the family dog jumped over the rising moon low on the horizon. Then they abandoned me. That night, I named the beings that inhabited my world. A 4-legged animal drew close, and I called her Dear, because she was dear to me. She walked on tiptoe across a ship's deck of luscious grass. Cautious, curious, she snuffled the ground at my feet, then nuzzled my left leg. A shoeless Joe, it swung for a moment. The deer spoke, but I couldn't decipher her words. She nuzzled me again, then nipped at the straw that protruded from the ragged tear at my left knee. I am young, but my straw is old and dry and gave no nourishment. 2 fawns drew near, and all 3 deer walked away to sample the new growth that pierced the garden with the emerald swords of its delicate tongues. That first night, Silver stars walked silent pathways across the sky. Magnified by some strange trick of the atmosphere, a red planet moved this way, that way in its platonic dance. 3 bright lights at 5 o'clock, the day's first plane rising from the airport and crossing to its unknown destination. I rejoiced as the morning star grew bright and the horizon lightened. Shadows burgeoned, the sun threw its golden mantle over the earth, and all was warm again. Dawn drew its misty cloak around my face. Black feathers cut through the air, and crows shattered the morning silence with crass calls, caw after caw. Shredded air, a morning coleslaw chopped white and blue. Crows dived for the garden, saw me, stood upright in surprise on their ladder of air, and climbed skyways again. Caw! With a single loud and wary warning, they fled the scene, but they didn't go far. They flew up into the trees and sat and watched me watching them. The sun grew warmer and feathered friends arrived with their burnt brown soldier uniforms. They bowed in my direction, and I called them robins, after Robin, the starry bowman who walked the sky at night, followed by his faithful hound. The robins patrol up and down the grass in search of worms. It's the early bird that catches the worm, my creators say. But it's the late and lazy worm that gets caught by the birds, say I. I watched those robins as they bunny hopped their sentry dance and paraded around my feet. Siskins, goldfinches, and occasional junco, I gave them all their names, mingled with the morning doves and their haunting cry. Crows, unscarred, not at all scared by my scarecrow self, fulfilled their destinies. They dropped down from the trees one by one and drove the smaller birds away. Pecking order, the size of beak, they say, and crows have massive beaks. My presence held no fear for them. They approached closer and closer until one flew up and perched on my head. Caw, he said, caw, caw, caw. The crow family Robinson climbed into the rigging of my land-bound ship and cawed in outrage and triumph from my arms and head. Then, I'm afraid, their goal accomplished, they abandoned me. A pair of robins staked out their territory. They plucked straw from my limbs and feathered their nest in my hat. Spring sang its way into summer, and the robins sat on my shoulders one by one and chirped about the clutch of sky-blue eggs ripening above me. I listened carefully until one day at dawn I sensed the eggs crack open. All day the parent birds flew the red and orange flags of their breasts back and forth, and I heard the cheeps and squawks of unseen beaks. Feathered fluffily at first, then fledged and flying, 3 young chicks, a trinity of joy, would squat together on the crossbeams of my arms. Then, one chilly morning, they and their parents were gone. Days grew shorter, nights colder. Tomatoes, lettuce, peas and beans were removed from the garden. The old folk mumbled about the paucity of the harvest and gave me dirty looks that spelled out useless, never again, and not worth the straw. Now, instead of wetness, the skies rained down the first full fall of autumn leaves. Children raked them into piles, tossed them into the red wheelbarrow, and stacked them higher and higher at the garden's foot. Sometimes, when the cold wind gusted, I would spin on my stick and survey the ominous brown tower they had built. At night, I dreamed of having a mate, torn perhaps from my straw-filled ribs. I wanted to be fulfilled, to fill with love's hot fire. I wished my creators had endowed me with real life, had breathed amorous flames into my straw, and set me truly free. Perhaps they knew that freedom's gift would allow me to rise in the air and fly away like the robins, or flee into the woods like the deer, and thus forsake them. They didn't want to be left alone. If they didn't have me, the one they created, who would be there to worship them? And what if I worshipped my beloved more than them? A creator, not worshipped by his creation, is a lonely being. Useless, my humans called them, and worse than useless. The fault was always mine, never that of my creators. And when it snowed, a white layer of guilt dusted my shoulders. One evening late in the fall, as my creators sighed the dead blackened flowers and cleared the vegetable beds of lifeless plants, they tore me from the earth, broke the stick of my back, and threw me into their barrow. They wheeled me down to the tower, cast me on the ground, emptied the barrow of its inadequate harvest, placed me in it again, and left me there. Next day, they returned and hung a placard around my neck. They planted sticks with cartridges at the tower's foot, placed pedestals with coloured cardboard tubes before the tower, nailed thin white cartwheels to taller sticks. Then they doused the tower in smelly yellow liquid from a can. They poured it on me, soiling my clothes, and then announced that everything was ready. But not just yet, they said. They brought a ladder, carried me to the top of the tower, and pronounced me king of the Guy Fawkes Castle. They danced by torchlight, lit the rockets, and sent them soaring in the air to burst star-bright against heaven's gate. The Catherine wheels sparked round and round in imitation of distant galaxies. The Roman candles recalled the glory of former gladiators and the please me not of the empire's disdain for lives other than his own. Then a moment of silence, a lighting of the match, a great cry of glee, and the tower on which I sat glowed with sunlight. I smelled crisp applewood smoke. I felt the fire's beloved kiss, and I burned with desire. I knew my moment had come, and I rejoiced in my salvation as I flared into my immortal life. Man giveth, man taketh away. Blessed be the name of man. I burned, and the burning set my soul on fire. It released me from my bondage and sent me soaring into the everlasting fire, into which all worlds will eventually return. I ascended, and the ascension filled me with eternal life. Dear. Okay, so I wonder if we'll get through some of those stories without crying. Sometimes my voice breaks. Okay, how are we doing for time? Oh, not too bad. What do you want to finish up with? I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have questions. I've got lots more I can read you. I could read you a poem that Chuck Bowie introduced me. Do I have a Chuck Bowie poem here? Do I have a Chuck Bowie
I
poem?
expect you might, just before that, could you tell us a little anecdote about your macadam experiences? And your Jeff's macadam experiences. Any anecdotes you want to share with us?
Well, the real anecdotes are that Jeff was doing a mural there. Do you want to explain the mural, Jeff? He was doing a mural at macadam, and you said to me, it's quite close, why don't I come down and look at it?
Yeah.
Jessie, who was sitting next to Jeff. Hi, Jessie. She came up and we were talking, and Jeff was painting, and I saw the mural. And the various guides at macadam started talking. And what I really noticed was, some of them have been pattering there for 7 to 10 years. So their speeches were pure poems, which is pure poetry. And I listened to it, came home, wrote it down, and then I went back a couple more times, went back with Claire as well, and I just added more and more until I had 26 poems there.
Yeah, we were there at a kind of a magical time too. They're not really open, and so we had the entire building to ourselves. And I was working in one portion of it, but the guides were, in and out. Elsie in particular, that's up there, Elsie Carroll. But they're full of story. Like the place is, just laden with story. Not just the story that I was there to depict, but every piece that is in that place has not just been from macadam, but they've started gathering things from across Canada, that all have story related to them. The clock, for instance, Do you remember the big clock there, Roger, that used to link time for the railroad across the country? You wrote a poem about that. Incredible story being gathered there. And then Irving's owned the rail line, but not the rail station, and you can be blocked off there for hours at a time as they, a train will come and block in the train station. You can't get past it. You can't. You're locked in there while they shuffle cars around and stuff. We were locked in the train station for hours at a time.
Yeah, 2.5 hours one day. Yeah.
And it still very much is a living, breathing thing, that station. You can feel the souls in it for thousands and thousands of people that have gone through it.
Used to be 16 trains a day went through it, and there's just one now, the Southern New Brunswick Railway, which is the Irving line. It used to be 16 trains a day.
Yeah.
Up from Boston, down from Montreal. Yeah.
If you can just unplug and sit there for a couple hours, story will come to you.
It's a spooky place too.
Yeah, it's magical. Yeah, there's just something about being in that. It's just it's living.
Poem number 2, page 4 in the McFadden book is called 14. 14 years old he was, left school to work at the station, pushed brooms to the cleaning, walked into men's washroom early one morning to give it a clean, found a man hanging there, dead, took out his pocket knife, cut him down, called for help. I met him at the station when he was 93. He told me all about it. Shrunk in size he did as he told the story. Shrunk until he was the same size he was at 14. Sort of thing you never forget, you know. Oh, I think I'll just go in the washroom. Oh. Yeah. You want the clock? Master clock. Here's master clock. Master clock's on page 8, number 6, poem 6. It came from the Empress in Victoria. It won't work here, I'm afraid. It's the clock that runs all the clocks and keeps them on time. It needs a network, 10, 20, 30 clocks that it can control from its central circuit, keeping them all on time. Just like the railway. The trains are always on time, except, just like this clock, they don't run anymore.
You sit there and you can't help but think, well, someday there'll be a server on the wall somewhere. Here was this piece of technology that 120 years ago was linking everything together, right? A state-of-the-art tool. And here we are all, functioning with these tools that we have that probably will just be museum pieces someday. And it's fascinating to think of that.
The last poem there is page 28, and this one's for you, Victor, and for you, Gwen. I went to them and they were at dinner at my place on Tuesday. Solution: heal the community, bring back jobs, rebuild, invite new people to be citizens, offer them land, benefits, sow new seeds, apply nutrients, watch them grow, restore the railway station, heal old wounds, bring the people back together, restore their pride, their belief, tap their memories, allow them to tell their stories, to rebuild their town. Easier said than done. Quod erat demonstrandum. Okay. You bored or you want one more? One more.
Keep it coming.
This one's for you, Jesse. I promised you I'd read you this one. Then I'll read Chuck's and then we'll almost give up. Now, hang on, where the heck is my Jesse poem? My Jesse poem is on learning Welsh. And Gwen and Victor heard me read this on Tuesday. I read it specially for them. And I think they know that my voice breaks about halfway through. That'll be fun for you. On learning Welsh. The story behind it is I'm 75 years old. I've never spoken Welsh fluently. It was banned in my house. If you spoke Welsh or spoke with a Welsh accent, you'd never get a job in Wales. You wouldn't. You had to speak with a posh English accent. And therefore Welsh was banned in our house. We never had to speak Welsh. So By the 8th of June, I sat down and I signed up to an online Welsh digital program, and I'm now on 192 consecutive days of learning Welsh, which is absolutely fantastic. Excellent. Here I sit, an old man now in front of my computer, learning at last my mother tongue, Welsh. English is the language of the invaders, the mine owners, the men who own the steelworks and the foundries, and who rule this land with a fist of coal inside an iron glove. Welsh is the tongue of farmers and fishermen, of the villagers who live in the hills and tend the sheep and plant potatoes in tiny small holdings where only the fittest children survive. My mother's father was the last of us to speak Welsh. It was banned in our house because it was bad for the kids. In a working class household, Welsh, be it language or accent, was a barrier to success. And success came from imitating your English betters and climbing upwards like a vine or Jack on his beanstalk until you achieved the impossible and talked and looked and dressed like them. Sitting here, I have discovered the beauty of simple words. Not so much their meaning as their sound, the way they flow, the poetry of remembered rhythms. Cwmryd Caerw, the valley of the leaping sky. Though legend has it that Caerw was really Cwrw, and Cwrw is beer, and its real name was the valley of the drowned stream frothing like beer. Words have their own music, even if you cannot pronounce them properly. Mae hyn bwrw glaw nawr in Abertawe. It's raining now in Swansea. Mae'r tywydd in waith heddiw. The weather's worse today. Bydd I dwym dydd Lyn. It will be warm on Monday. Place names also have their own magic. Llanllys and Llandaff, Dinas Powys, Gelli Gaer, Abertawe, Casnewydd, Penybont. Meaning changes when you switch from one language to another. Gwraig T, a housewife. Gwr T, a house husband. A concept of equality that has ruled Welsh lives since before Julius Caesar invaded Albion, coming from Gaul with his legions in 55 BC. 16, 27, 38, 99. The photographer takes photos as I speak in English, then French, Spanish, then Latin. Finally, I speak in Welsh. He checks the memory card in his camera and looks puzzled. Your facial expressions change each time you speak a different language, he tells me. Look, this is when you spoke French. He shows me the photo, and yes, I look happy. And this is when you spoke Latin. He holds out the camera, and I see myself on the screen. I look ever so grim. English, Spanish, French, and Welsh, all different, and each language is a new map carved into my face. Am I a clown then, a chameleon to wear so many masks and to slip so easily from one to another? Which then is my language? And where is the old red sandstone from Wales into which I can carve my memories and my dreams? More important, which of those many tongues will shape my story as I sculpt each letter of my tale? Read it twice now. And you have it. Yeah.
So for being forbidden to speak, it wasn't an institutional thing or a cultural thing. It was your own parents telling you to learn English so you get a better job.
Yeah, but it was cultural too. In my case, my parents, I think I told you before, there's Irish blood, there's Scottish blood, English blood, and certainly not pure Welsh. But Welsh was, if it wasn't banned, it was certainly frowned upon. There were Welsh-speaking areas and there were English-speaking areas, and our area was basically English-speaking. And no, Welsh was quite frowned upon. It wasn't until about 1955, and I was sent to school in England specifically, so I wouldn't work for Welsh accent. So I grew up with an English accent instead, so I could talk like that if I have to. And every so often I do, just to impress people. They look very impressed, some of them. Oh yes, you've got to put your finger behind your nose, you know. I say Chuck. I saw my mother-in-law's house, though I was trying to. The guy comes up to me, And he's speaking to me in this very, very posh accent. And he suddenly looks at me and says, "My God," he said, "you're Welsh, you're Welsh." I said, "So I am, boy." I said, "What the heck are you going to do about it?" And I had a friend in school, John Powell Tuck, great man, wonderful player, hated his guts. He was born in Chepstow and he talked just like this all the time, he did. The last time I met him was in 1986 at the Old Boys Union. I said, "Hello, John, how are you?" He looked and said, "Oh, hello, old God." "That is Roger, isn't it?" Yes, I do remember you. I said, "How nice." I said, "What happened to your accent?" "Well," he said, "I sell real estate," he said. "You think I'd ever have sold a house if I had an accent from Wales?" I tell you.
The caste system is alive and well.
Oh, I know. They can't be English teach their children how to speak. This
The
verbal
language
caste
coming back
distinction.
to life now and much.
Well, yes, I was going to say, somewhere around 55, 58, they did two things. Number one, they brought it back into the schools. And number two, they set up newspapers and a radio station. And the radio station then became a television station. So there's now television in Welsh, news in Welsh, Gymraeg Cymru is the news in Welsh, I can say that. And to leave school at 15, you had to do at least one school leaving paper in Welsh. Well, my parents were very, very pleased they had me in England, I tell you. But yes, it has come back. Right, about the 50s, there might have been 150, 200,000 people speaking Welsh in Wales. Nowadays, today, there's probably close to 800,000, and it's out of a population of about 3.5, 4 million. And they're looking to get 1 million people speaking Welsh by 2050. That's the sort of the aim.
All of the signs in Cardiff are in English and Welsh.
Yes, and that is new, they didn't used to be. The Cardiff buses were in English and Welsh, but that was about, oh, ambulance too. Ambulance, A-M-B-W-L-A-N-S, ambulance. I bet you don't know what a saucepan is in Welsh. Saucepan, that's S-P-A-N, saucepan. Some great Welsh words there.
Village in New Brunswick,
What, saucepan?
Cardigan.
Oh yes, cardigan.
Village of Cardigan, if you go back into the 1870s or 80s, there were Welsh speakers there.
Yeah, 1819, the brig, I forgot what his name was now, came from Carmarthen and landed in St John, and the Welsh settlers moved up to Cardigan, where they were given places in the woods. Yes, 1819, and it's the 200th anniversary this year. Yeah. But most of them have never seen Wales. I used to go regularly to the meetings, but the old Welsh people who actually spoke a bit of Welsh or who were born in Wales, they've all left, and I stopped going.
And I met some Welsh speakers in Newfoundland. Newfoundland.
Oh yes,
On Random Island. What happened, Random Island is in Trinity Bay in Newfoundland, and there were a group of Welsh miners, well they weren't really miners, they made slates. They came over and moved to Trinity Bay in Newfoundland.
Yep.
And they made slates and they sold them for roofing. And that Welsh language was still there when I was there in 74, 75.
Probably from North Wales, probably from the Snowdon area, probably from Llanberis, which is where the great slate factories are. Yeah.
And they were still speaking, they still had Welsh words in
Yeah.
their language.
Well, the North Wales do, and certainly Llanberis. I was playing, I went on a trip around Snowdonia with my school, which was absolutely hilarious. And we found a whist drive in the village. So I went down to the village, and a friend of mine played in the whist drive, and they all speaking Welsh, and they don't know I speak as well. But sitting down, and I look at my cards, and they look at their cards, and the lady opposite says something in Welsh. And then he says, "Don't you speak Welsh, do you?" And my friend says, "Oh no, I don't speak Welsh." "Oh," she says, "pity." And looks at the card and says, "I got the King of Spades, the Ace of Hearts, and 5 diamonds. What have you got?" We did not win that tournament.
When were you there last, and are you ever going to get back?
I'll never go back.
No.
I was there last in 1988, which was the year before my father passed away. And I couldn't get back for the funeral, and I haven't been back since. 1988, 1990. 1991, I went back to see Claire's mother in England, and I had a grant to do work in Spain, but I stopped in England. I drove from my mother-in-law's house to the bridge that crosses the River Severn. And I sat in the cafe and I looked over the Severn into Wales, and I started to cry. I could not cross that bridge. I thought to go home to my hometown and live in a hotel, no family, didn't know anyone. I thought, Neil, I couldn't do it. I thought, I just cannot do this. I went back home to Bournemouth.
But your trips to Wales are made manifest in your stories. I adore your short stories.
Well, that's the recollection of Wales.
And those are the trips to Wales, I think.
Yeah. I go back there every night. On most nights, anyway. But there's certainly been a match. And I tell you, learning the Welsh language again, and much better, has given me an insight into my childhood that I never thought I'd have. It's been absolutely wonderful. The rhythms of the language, the rhythms of the places, the sound of the words, and then suddenly things click and you think, oh, so that's what it was all about, you know? And it's very interesting, very, very interesting.
Read us the story of your aunt at the seashore.
Oh, I haven't got that one here.
No.
But I don't have that one. I've got do I have another Welsh one here? I think I've got one more Welsh one here. Let me just check.
You will have to do a future reading where you bring it
Oh, yeah.
in the spring.
Jeff and I will get to work on it, yes.
Yes. Oh, the date for the spring.
Whenever you do a short story course, somebody brings the story to the course called Things They Carried With Them. Have you read Things They Carried With Them? And it's a story of a platoon in Vietnam during the Vietnamese War. And it goes through every item that every soldier carried, the weight of that item, how they lived, how they survived, and it was the things they carried with them, and some of them died. And the short story is very dynamic, very powerful. I thought one day, well, what are the things I carry with me? And these are the things I carry with me. That old black cast iron stove, wood fire, that baked the best ever breads and cakes and warmed the bungalow on cold summer mornings. The Welsh dresser with its age-blackened rails that displayed the precious plates, cups and saucers. This one is in Tales from Tara, sadly. You should have it there if you want to follow it. The old tin cans that ferried the water from the one tap located at the end of the field. Full and wholesome, their weight sometimes shared, still weighs me down as I carry it in my dreams. The Elson toilet from the shed by the hedge, and the shovels that appeared as if by magic as my uncle braved the evening shadows to dig a hole on the opposite side of the field, as far from the bungalow as possible. The outhouse at the end of the garden, the steps down the road, down the coal cellar where they went when the siren sounded, to sleep in the makeshift air raid shelter along with the rats and mice that scurried from the candles. The corrugated iron workshop in the garden where my uncle built his model ships, the halfpenny galleon and the Nonsuch. The broken razor blades I used to carve, my own planes from Keelcraft kits, Hurricanes and Spitfires, an SE-5 and once a Bristol Bulldog. Twisted and warped, they winged their ways into nobody's skies, though once we built a paper kite that flew far away in a powerful wind and got tangled in a tree. The greenhouse from which I stole countless tomatoes, red and green, Kilvey Hill, towering above the window ledge where little ones sat when there were more guests than chairs in the kitchen. The old bomb buildings across the street, the bullet holes in the front of the house where the Messerschmitt scratched us, the old men spitting up coal dust from shriveled lungs, the widows who took in lodgers and overnight travellers, the BRS lorries parked overnight that littered the street, the steep upward climb into those lorries, the burrowing under dirty tarpaulins to explore the heavy loads, and many other unmentionable things. The untouchable forbidden drawer where the rent money waited for the rent collector's visit, the old lady 5 houses down who, when the shops were shut, sold warm dandelion and burdock and orange Corolla pop for an extra penny a bottle. Her vicious, snub-faced Pekingese that yapped fierce defiance from the fortress of her lap. The unemployed soccer referee on Saturdays walked 5 miles to the match and 5 miles back just to save the bus fare, his own financial reward. My father's shadowy childhood, his first pair of shoes bought at 5 years old so he wouldn't go barefoot to school. Wet cement moulded onto the garden wall, then filled with empty bottles to be smashed when the cement set solid. The coal shed where the coal man delivered the coal, cobbled down the hole. The outside toilet with its nails in the door from which hung squares torn from yesterday's newspaper. The lamplighter who lit the gas lamps every evening as the sun went down. The arrival of electricity. The old blackout curtains that shut in the light and shut out the night. The hand-rolled all-rag fabric sausage that lay on the floor by the door and kept the heat of the coal fire in the kitchen. The kitchen itself, with its great wooden chair drawn up by the fire. That chair, the only material possession I still had from that distant past. I got strength enough for one more story that I was not going to read you, but I think you're all feeling miserable. So, hello. I'm going to read Teeth, you've heard Teeth. Teeth, this is a Welsh story called Teeth, lunchtime. I open a can of tomato soup and heat it on the stove. I slice the remains of yesterday's loaf of bread into 1-inch cubes and fry them in olive oil and garlic. Tomato soup with croutons. Then I put 2 slices of bread in the toaster. My father will only eat toast soaked in butter and laid with Marmite when he eats tomato soup. Lunch is ready, I call out. The black American Cocker Spaniel, brought by my mother in a moment of madness by telephone unseen, camps in the kitchen. It nests at the far end of the table by the stove and defends its territory with warning growls and a snapping of yellow teeth. I do my best to avoid dog. Lunch is ready, Dad, I call out a little bit louder. Dog, as my father called it, growls and clatters its teeth. It has hidden a treasure in the folds of its old grey comfort blanket and guards it with the fierce loving worry of a dragon protecting its golden hoard. My father enters the kitchen just as I place the soup on the table. I'm not ready to eat, my father says. Put it back in the pot. What's wrong, Dad? I thought you were hungry. My teeth, my father mumbles through a mouthful of pink gums. I can't find my teeth. Where on earth did you put them? I don't know. If I knew I put them, I wouldn't have lost them. My father circulates around the kitchen, opening drawers, lifting saucepan lids and shaking empty yogurt pots to see if they'll offer up the rattling sound of lost teeth. I can't find them anywhere. I can't eat lunch without my teeth. There's only soup, Dad. Tomato soup. I don't like tomato soup. Your mother always made tomato soup. Why can't you be more like your mother? Sorry, Dad. I'll call it tomato soup if that will make you feel better. It's still made out of tomatoes. Don't be so sarcastic. Help me find my teeth. My father stomps towards the stove and Dog growls fiercely from its blanket as it guards its treasure. Take that, you dirty dog. My father pokes Dog in the ribs with his stick and Dog howls and spits out what it is chewing. There they are. My father's voice trembles with excitement. He bends down, picks up his teeth, still hairy from the blanket and bubbly from the dog's saliva, and pops them straight into his mouth. That's better, he says, sitting down at the table. Now I can enjoy my lunch. I thought we should finish on a joyous note. You love that one,
He was so generous to orders.
Oh, no problem. How do you enjoy that? Yeah.
Well,
We have a cake to cut, by the way. Is Chuck leaving?
Are you okay, Chuck?
Not having
Okay, good.
Oh,
the cake maker is gone, the cake maker is gone.
I think we're I'm happy to say it wasn't my class. It wasn't. What do you know?
I enjoyed that very much, young man.
Thank you.